over $1 trillion needed to ease housing affordability coming from the banksters themselves, the CMHC. So let's get right into this and see what's going on. At least $1 trillion needed to achieve housing affordability, the CMHC says. Now, I might actually agree with them on that, because if you go to a Canadian mortgage debt chart, which is currently well over $2 trillion right now, if that corrected to $1 trillion, yeah, housing probably would be affordable. But it's where is that money going to go? Where do the central planners want that money to go? So let's continue on here and see what they're saying. It says right here, the amount of money is so enormous that we really need the private sector involved, Deputy Chief Economist said. The government can't do it alone. Maybe that's a good place to get Blackrock involved. We know that Blackrock really wants to be part of this. You'll own nothing and be happy. Larry Fink, obviously trustee at the World Economic Forum with our finance minister, Chrystia Freeland. Here's the thing that all the central planners make this mistake is they go on and on and on about supply. We just need more supply. When it's really the fact that entities and institutions like the CMHC are actually the thing that makes housing less affordable. They have created massive moral hazard in the banking system that has allowed the banksters to lend to more and more risky clients, and that has increased the price of real estate as it goes up, as that moral hazard has increased over the years. And the thing is, CMHC is just insurance. But just in case you were thinking, no, the CMHC is like independent, it's part of the government, everything is fine with the CMHC, you only have to look at who is head of the CMHC right now. Romy Boas, president and CEO of the CMHC. I think she makes over $450,000, in case you're wondering, plus benefits and pension and everything like that. But prior to joining the CMHC, Romy had a diverse career in the Canadian banking industry, including 12 years with the Bank of Montreal, where she gained extensive experience in treasury operations and risk management. So she comes from the banksters themselves. She is a bankster herself. So literally, the banksters are coming out and saying, we need to do this and that. And those are the people that are literally pushing housing affordability down and down and down for the average person in Canada. And that is what you do when you essentially just allow more and more people into the housing market. You go more and more risky, and eventually it all comes to head like we're seeing right now. So you've also got this happening. A lot of you asked me to cover this, and I did see this before, and I thought it's very interesting because it kind of confirms a suspicion that I've had all along about this hiking cycle, that it's more to do with credibility than anything else. So let's read what's been going on here with the Bank of Canada. So the premiers of Ontario, British Columbia, Newfoundland and Labrador wrote to McClem ahead of the Bank of Canada's September 6th rate decision, outlining concerns about the effects of higher interest rates on their residents and asking the central bank not to raise its key rate further. In a September 13th letter, McClem warned that instructions or requests from elected officials could give the impression the Bank of Canada's independence is at risk. And obviously, he would only write a letter like that if he was really thinking that was a problem to begin with, which it obviously is, because Pierre has been throwing this up constantly about the Bank of Canada's credibility and outlining legitimate things that kind of prove the connection in 2020 and 2021 between the Bank of Canada and the government, that the government was influencing them. I mean, the fact is, it's undeniable the links between the federal government and the Bank of Canada. As I've said many times, the Bank of Canada relies on data it receives from Statistics Canada, which is a government entity. So obviously, if that data is completely manipulated, guess what? That's going to manipulate the decisions that they make in monetary policy. As I've said many times, the inflation data is a great example of that, because when you look at how the inflation data has become more and more manipulated over time, obviously that influences key decisions that the Bank of Canada makes and has kept interest rates so low for so long. But obviously, eventually, that doesn't continue anymore. And the real thing that is really just disastrous throughout this past decade is this chart that I created going back to 1997 that really shows just the disaster that has happened. So essentially, the red line is inflation doubled. So that basically shows that inflation peaked out in 2022 at 16.2%, which I think is a modest number, and I think many of you would agree with that. So if you then take the average hourly earnings and the percentage change year year over year, you essentially find out how negative wages have been since 1997. So the data only goes back as far as 1997, but as you can see here, it's only gone over 0%. So it's only gone positive twice since 1997. Think about that, guys. 26 years, and we've literally had wages go above inflation twice. That's all that's happened. And once was after the GFC, the global financial crisis, where you got 0.75%, essentially barely anything. And then the other time was even higher, which was in the stimulus and savings boom in 2020, when it got to 1.23%. So obviously it does kind of give some picture of where wages have gone. But as you compound and add up all these negative prints that we've had, we know that the consumer has just been absolutely screwed over time and is losing money hand over fist, and their purchasing power is just being evaporated. And no wonder we hit the mania in 2020 and 2021, because essentially everybody was like, man, I've got no money. I need to do something. I need to buy this crypto coin that's going to make me a millionaire. It just pushed everybody out on the risk curve so much as they saw their purchasing power decline so much over time. And even though this was a little increase and barely made up for the massive declines that we've had, it just goes to show how desperate people really are. And again, we're going to go into another poll here, which just shows that exact thing, how desperate people really are in Canada. I mean, these surveys and polls, they keep coming out. Canadians are facing a financial storm, and experts say it's time to plan ahead. The time to plan ahead was years ago, and I've been beating that drum for a long, long time. The time to prepare right now, you're so late, it's very difficult to do so. I mean, think about having your money in the Canadian dollar, for instance. Canadian dollar's been declining. The time to sell Canadian dollars was a year ago, was months ago. So anyway, it's just kind of crazy that preparation is key, because otherwise you're just going to end up in a terrible situation. The survey of 1,500 working Canadians, including 81% who are full-time workers, found the number who considered themselves financially stressed has jumped by 20% in the past year to 37% overall. So 37% of working Canadians, they're working full-time, say they are financially stressed. Just think about that. They're working right now. The survey goes further, finding that 66% of those who consider themselves financially stressed are living paycheck to paycheck, and 50% are feeling overwhelmed by their debt. And you know, it's no wonder, because when you have this happen, how does that happen? When wages are falling so much, how does that happen? Because it's a valid question, right? They've plugged the hole that they're missing in their balance sheet with debt. That's how it's been continually allowed to happen. It's just more and more debt. Now, obviously, it's very easy to see that that is a complete disaster long term, and it's coming to head right now as we're seeing. But that is how it's continued for so long. The fact that interest rates were so low, they kept going lower so people could take on more and more debt, and that was filling the void that they had in their income, which they lost to things like inflation. 2% inflation over 10 years, that is 20% of your income that you've lost. But people don't realize that this 2% target is complete bullshit. It should be scrapped. And any politician I hear, Pierre, Trudeau, Jagmeet, saying 2% inflation target, and they just don't even question that, I wonder who is really pulling the strings behind the scenes. They also mention a couple more things in here which I think are quite interesting that we should look at. For some Canadians, the added worry over their finances is having an isolating social impact. Of those Canadians identifying as part of the financially stressed group, 55% of them say they feel more isolated due to the rise of cost of living, and that is impacting those close to them. And that would obviously happen because they can't spend as much money. They're trying to cut back and save, and that means that you're going to have to cut back on social things, social outings. Your standard of living essentially is just plummeting when that happens. So obviously that's going to affect your mental health, and it's a very sad thing, and it's a sad consequence of what we've seen happen over the past decade, and really what started to go parabolic after after 2008 in Canada. So yeah, it is really, really sad that that is happening. And then there was one more thing that I wanted to go over. Chuck Grace, managing director of Canada's Financial Wellness Lab, said in a statement that 35% of the stressed cluster actually earn more than $100,000 per year. So more than a six-figure salary, and they are stressed out about the cost of living and everything that is going on right now in Canada. But it doesn't matter whether you're earning $100,000 or $50,000. People's expenses increase generally with their income, and that's one of the problems that most people have. People think, oh, my income's increased, so it's time to buy a bigger house. It's time to buy a better car. So they end up being no better off because they're just constantly expanding the amount of debt they owed. That just isn't a good thing. And that's a result of people not being taught in school proper ways to handle your finances. It's just utterly ridiculous. But the government doesn't obviously want to teach you that in school because they want you to be a debt slave. So it's just ultimately a disaster. But anyway, I want to thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, you might like this video here that I picked out for you. You might like this playlist here. If you're looking for a VPN to get around Bill C-11, this was broadcasted to you on ExpressVPN. If you want to take advantage of their offer, go to expressvpn.com/marketmania. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.